evening, everybody. One more time, good evening, everybody. You all ought to give yourselves a round of applause for getting here at 6 o'clock in traffic from our jobs to represent for the city of Los Angeles, but more importantly, to represent for our neighborhood, South Los Angeles. I want folks to do me a favor. If you've got an empty seat next to you, can you raise your hand? Because we got folks in the back that need seats and folks are still coming in. We're very excited. We're expecting about 400 people tonight total. So if you can just raise your hands and keep them up, we can get folks ushered in. We want to begin the night by thanking the Ward AME family for hosting us this evening and making it such a comfortable space in their beautiful facility. I also want to start off the night with a little bit of a roll call. We want to put up front the groups who started meeting several months ago and decided that a group of community organizations and the labor unions that represent the working people of South LA and beyond wanted to come together and put on this forum. And so I'm going to call out your name and you do what you need to do to let it be known that you're in the house tonight. One of our main partners, SEIU ULTCW. All right. SEIU Local 99, our school employees, SEIU USSW, the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy, Lane, the Watts Labor Community Action Committee, Scope in the orange t-shirts, LA Voice, the Black Worker Center in the black t-shirts, and our friends and family of Community Coalition in the blue t-shirts. We want to thank all of you for being here. And before we get started in earnest with the content of our program, we want to bring up the shepherd of this flock, a great man of the cloth, Reverend Ronald Thomas, to bring our invocation.
I just want to make one correction. I'm on staff here. I'm not the shepherd of the flock. But if we can all pause for a moment and quiet ourselves and bow our heads for a moment of prayer. If we could stop the walking and stand where you are, please. Dear wise and loving Father, we first want to give you thanks on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for a measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work, for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thank you for loving us even so from your boundless and gracious nature. In your word, you have stated that your people should obey the governing authorities, since you have established those authorities to promote peace, order, and justice. Therefore, I pray for the workings on the employees working on these various campaigns. I pray for an informed electorate. In particular, I pray for those seeking the office of mayor of this great city. I'm asking that you would wisely and graciously grant them the wisdom to debate the issues and not to conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to have honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives, and a joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set forth before them this evening to give them an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work and around this great city of the angels. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Appreciate it. All right, you all ready to get started? Are you really ready to get started? All right, to set the tone for today, we want to bring up a special speaker to kind of get us a little warmed up, get our mental juices flowing, and for us to get our thinking caps on. We want to bring up a person who's a people's champion, a supporter of not only South LA, but working people throughout the city, a person who's been on the front lines of the struggle for African Americans, for Latinos, for immigrants and people of color and working people for years and years and years. I won't say how many. Well, let's bring her up with a big round of applause. The leader of the labor movement here in Los Angeles, Maria Elena Durazo.
Good evening, buenas tardes. It's great to be here. Sisters and brothers, hermanos y hermanas, look around you. This is South LA. Look around you. South LA is beautiful. South LA is vibrant. South LA is diverse. And South LA is full of talent. You know, the community groups, the churches, the unions that have risen in response to conflict and injustice in our neighborhoods, today we are united. We are united because we have to meet some very big challenges. And we've got big challenges like we need to create good jobs. I say good jobs. Not just jobs. Good jobs with a pathway, a very clear pathway to the middle class. We want our schools to be better, right? Our kids deserve the best. We want to make sure that all our young people have every opportunity in front of them so they could decide which one they pick. We want to make sure that our roads are fixed. We want to make sure that we have a good public transit system so we could get around this city, get to our jobs, get to schools, get to our places of leisure, get to church, get to wherever we want. And we want access to good, quality, and affordable housing, right? And everyone here tonight, we're here because we care about Los Angeles. We care about the City of Angels. We care about the direction that the city is taking. And we are here because we're going to be a part in deciding who the next mayor of LA is going to be. South LA is full of potential. And Angelenos cannot afford to have South LA overlooked, ignored, or pushed aside. And our next mayor must share our vision for the city. She or he must share our values and stand with working families to build a city that we all deserve. That means that we don't respond to a food desert by letting in grocery stores that do nothing but provide poverty-level jobs. We want good food and good jobs. That means we don't answer a lack of jobs by building a Walmart that makes billions of dollars, takes our tax subsidies, and yet doesn't pay its workers enough to put food on the table. That means we don't use our public dollars to build up our roads, trains, and infrastructure without looking and getting skilled workers from our very own community, and without creating new apprenticeship opportunities on those projects. That means that we don't sit back and watch one part of the city succeed and watch another part of the city fail. Tonight is a first step. It's a next step. Tonight is an opportunity to get fully engaged. Listen carefully, because everyone here has got to go back, talk to your coworkers. You got to go back and talk to your neighbors. You got to go back and talk to your parents, your kids, your brothers and sisters and families, and tell them what you heard tonight about the candidates and about the power that you have to change our city. Talk with them about voting. Get them involved with every single one of these organizations today and with the campaigns. And most importantly, sisters and brothers, stay involved to make sure that when we elect our new mayor, that he or she sticks to the pledges and the promises that they make tonight. Let's get it started.
All right, let's give another round of applause to Maria Elena Durazo. All right, without any further ado, we're going to get the conversation started. We want to have, as Maria Elena said, a very sharp and a very precise conversation about what folks want to do as mayor of the city of Los Angeles, but we want folks to put out a specific vision for South Los Angeles. It is great to say we want to bring the whole city forward and we don't want to leave anybody behind, but South LA has got particular challenges and particular opportunities, and we require particular solutions. And so, is that all right? Yeah. So we're going to ask the candidates tonight to speak about those particular solutions. To moderate, referee, and cajole the conversation forward today, we have a woman who is no stranger to big jobs, because she's got a big job tonight, is that right? Yeah. She has been recently in the Obama administration in the Department of Education. That's a big job. Before that, she was a vice provost at USC. That's a big job. And before that, she was the chief of staff to then city council member Mark Ridley Thomas. That's a real big job. We want to bring up our moderator tonight and make her feel a warm South LA welcome, Carolyn Webb de Macias.
Well, all right, folks, it's time to get this party started. I know all of you have some questions on your minds, and we've got 3 fabulous public servants who are here this evening, all of whom have had stellar careers in the city of Los Angeles and beyond. They have drawn straws for positioning on the stage, so there's nothing to be implied by where they stand. It is a matter of drawing straws. And we are going to be asking a series of questions, and they will rotate who gets to answer first on any certain question. I want you to keep me honest. I'm going to try to make this move the way it's supposed to move. But, you know, in the heat of the moment, you kind of get excited, and all the organization does not necessarily keep you straight. So you all keep us honest. Let me start by introducing 3 people whom most of you should know by now, but who will present themselves in response to your questions, and in particular about their policies and intentions relative to South Los Angeles. That's our focus tonight. So let me begin by introducing and bringing to the stage the Honorable Jan Perry, Council District 8 and mayoral contender. Secondly, the Honorable Eric Garcetti, Council District 13. And the Honorable Wendy Gruhl, Comptroller for the City of Los Angeles. Now, this is how it's going to go tonight. We're going to have a couple of minutes for them to give their introductions. Oh, I didn't say that. I just changed the rules, didn't I? I introduced you, so you don't get to do that?
Right.
Okay. We're going to have our discussion in 2 parts tonight. The first section will be questions that come from the organizations that are sponsoring this event tonight. We're going to be talking about public safety, housing, and jobs. There will be 15 minutes on each of those topics. There will be a question asked. Each of the candidates will get to answer 1 to 1.5 minutes. We have a timekeeper here in the front row, Elaine. She's going to raise her card so we can try to keep on time. Then we'll have a second section, which will be your questions. I know some of you have filled out some cards already, and there are a couple of people who are collecting them. All cards must be in by 6:50 so that we have an opportunity to get them all to the front. We won't be able to ask every question, but we will ask representative questions. Please put your name on the cards, first and last name, so that if I read your card, I can call your name and you can stand up and be recognized, okay? We're going to try to keep this rolling. And we're going to start then with a question on public safety. Our first question is going to be asked by Fanya Baruti, a member of the Community Coalition. Where's Fanya? Ah, here you are. You need the microphone, so I hope you don't get stage fright.
No.
These are all friends and neighbors and relatives.
Good evening. My name is Fanya Baruti, and I am the organizer for All of Us and None, which is a project of a new way of life reentry. We are an organization of organized, formerly incarcerated, and convicted people that fight for the restoration of our civil and human rights. Recently, we just had 2 women that came to our homes. One just came home from prison doing 24 years, and the other 25 years. And so they have a lot of needs, and they need to be in an environment such as ours. There are over 65 million people in the United States that face harsh penalties after being convicted. And Los Angeles has one of the largest numbers of individuals returning to this area than any other area of the state. In addressing the so-called war on drugs, it must be noted that it began the movement of tough on crime, which has actually been a war on people of color in poor communities. And because of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to reduce prison population, and the passing of Proposition 36, mandating the release of some 3 strikers, an influx of people will be released from prison in the Los Angeles area without proper resources. This is a public safety issue with an adverse effect. While activists have placed pressure on the county to invest resources in housing, employment, and healthcare services, the city of Los Angeles has considered policies like the Community Care Facilities Ordinance that will reduce the availability of mental health, addiction treatment, and housing for the formerly incarcerated. So my question.
It's coming.
I should have explained that the representatives of the organizations would start with a preamble.
I see. Okay.
That was his preamble. Okay, now for the question.
You got to hear this closely. What policies and practices will you advocate for those that will, that you would advocate for that will remove the barriers to employment, housing, health services, civic participation for the formerly incarcerated? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Perry?
And I want you to know that I started out this forum with your moderator this evening. I saying, don't ask me an 8-part question now. But I thank you to the coalition and all the members here tonight, and to Mr. Razzo and everyone who's here for coming out and mobilizing. That's a very important question that you asked. I used to represent Skid Row for the last 11 years, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. Many of the people who are coming out of prison under the realignment program are being sent directly to Skid Row without a safety net in place, while some of the nonprofit social service providers struggle to find funding to accommodate the needs of people who are coming out of prison. It just simply is not enough. I have supported Ban the Box to remove the barrier to employment. I have worked side by side with nonprofit affordable housing developers for people who are coming out through realignment, mixed income, and everything in between. I do not believe that the community care facilities ordinance was ready. I do not support it. We cannot force more people into homelessness. No ifs, ands, or buts. The county has to provide us more support for services on site. We build the housing, they fund the services, and let's see what else. I just want you to know, I saw something in the paper the other day. I had a woman who worked for me who had done time. She's a grandmother. She has 2 girls, 2 women, female daughters who had some issues. She's got about 5 grandchildren. She works for the city of Los Angeles now because she got hired through a contract, and now she has a permanent job with good health care benefits and a pension.
Great. Let me ask the audience to hold your applause. I know we're enthusiastic, but that ticks away our time.
Thank you.
So if you would hold the applause. Thank you, Ms. Perry. I think you had completed your answer, correct?
Oh, no, I was, yeah, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you all. A very good evening. First of all, muy buenas noches a todos. Thank you all for coming. Gracias por venir. It is a great joy to be here with Labor, with Scope and Agenda, with LA Voice, with Community Coalition, with all the groups that for a decade we've worked together. Ace, I didn't forget you as well. All the folks that have been a part of making sure that we have a more just city. This question cuts to the heart of who we're going to be, and tonight, who we see ourselves as a city. My grandfather had a barber shop a few blocks away from here. He worked very hard. My grandmother was a meat packer who worked that double shift of so many women of her generation, getting up early, working a full day, and coming home to make sure her family had food on the table. I know that my father, who is here tonight, I didn't know he was coming, that because he played in that barber shop where my grandfather cut the hair of university professors, learned about college, and graduated from Washington High School and became the first in his family to graduate from college. It's the same reason that when I was hired at USC, I joined together with Unite here to make sure when the dining hall workers there were going to lose their health care, that I got arrested and spent the night in jail with Unite Here members to make sure that we stood up for and got that health care service back. But I want to go back to my grandfather because the question was about what happens to those who get in trouble. Well, see, my grandfather used to brag that he had been arrested as a young man, but turned his life around. And he actually pointed out once that he was arrested by a young LAPD officer named Tom Bradley. That insertion in his life turned his life around. And so what would I do specifically on this issue? One, I've also worked closely and praised Ms. Perry for her work on this to ban the box, but I go a step further and go to our private employers to say, get rid of that box once and for all, that keeps people segregated away from jobs. Number 2, I would hire the first coordinator at our Workforce Investment Board specifically to work on reentry programs. A reentry coordinator to take those who are coming out of our jails and our prisons on the Workforce Investment Board, where we get hundreds of millions of dollars over the last decade to put people back to work and say, what are you going to do to keep the former incarcerated off the streets and off the unemployment rolls and in a job? And then third, I will look at us addressing racial equity when we look at these issues. This is the last time I'll talk about my father, but I was very proud that an ex-prosecutor who was for the death penalty in this last election, and we almost changed it, came out against the death penalty and chaired that campaign. I've been working on him for years. But if you look at the sentencing disparity, whether it's cocaine versus crack, whether it is the way that we have made marijuana legal instead of the federal government reclassifying it so that we can take young men and young women and give them opportunities to turn their lives around, we have to do that as well to address the stream into the jails.
Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the organizers and the organizations that I've worked with for decades, since I started my first career working for Mayor Tom Bradley, and to be in this beautiful church that we are so happy to be in, that not only provides us good faith, but also works in our community and our neighborhoods. That's what it's about in the city of Los Angeles. But it's about this sign over here that says, ready to work. We're ready to work. And when we think about what we need to do in Los Angeles to get back to work, to deal with the issues of health care and unemployment and gang violence. I recently said it's easier to get a gun than it is mental health services. It's easier to get a gun than it is to get housing in the city of Los Angeles. So we have to take all of our efforts and ensure that that happens. And let me tell you a little bit about what I've done on this issue over the last several years. We have to clearly remove barriers to the kinds of employment and make sure people have training. I audited the Workforce Investment Board and said, although they provided money for placement services, they were placing them in no jobs because there weren't any jobs. We should be spending money on job training to get them into the jobs of the future. It's important to address the issue of homelessness. And when you look at the streets of Los Angeles, you look at our brothers and sisters that are on those streets. We need to find a place for them to go. We need to make sure that we have the housing dollars necessary. As someone who worked for President Clinton and Henry Cisneros at HUD, we worked very closely to make sure that we had housing dollars across this country and, yes, here in the city of Los Angeles. I'm proud to have brought $20 million to this community to deal with the issue of housing. But we need wraparound services in all of our communities. We had I had an opportunity a few years ago to meet with a group of young men at a youth facility in North Valley, Silmar. We sat down one morning on a Saturday morning and started talking about what would have changed their lives. Because, all right, give me just a second, okay. What would have changed their lives? What would have made a difference in their lives? And they said to me, Wendy, what would have changed our lives is to have somebody in our life, a male figure in our life. These were all young boys. And to have an educational system where the schools actually cared about where we went. Because I'm telling you, I'm running, and I will close with this. I'm running for mayor to be the mayor for all of Los Angeles. Because no part of our city should be left behind, whether it be health care services, housing, job training, and you need a mayor who's going to be that strong advocate and who has the experience to do it. I will be that fighter. I look forward to working with you on that.
Okay, let me say this. I have a little logistic problem here. You all can't see me because I'm beside you instead of in front of you, so this is causing a little issue. We have to try to stick to the minute and a half. And so your peripheral vision needs to be working. When I take a step, that means finish that sentence.
Yes.
And she's right there with the
I know, and she's right there with the time, but
should move you to the
be
center.
forceful.
that's okay. I'm responsible for it, and I know that you can't see me, so I'll be moving over here. All right, next question. And this one comes from the Community Coalition. South Los Angeles residents have identified the overconcentration of liquor stores, motels, recycling centers, and vacant lots in South LA neighborhoods as sources of crime and violence. Under the city's nuisance abatement ordinance, the city has the authority to hold property owners accountable for conditions on their property that threaten the health and safety of their neighbors. However, the city rarely enforces the ordinance against nuisance property owners. The question is, how will you prioritize improving the enforcement of the city nuisance abatement ordinance and implement land use strategies to decrease the number of vacant lots in South Los Angeles? Question goes first to Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you.
Minute and a half.
Thank you. I'll be quick then. My wife and I have worked very closely with Community Coalition for years, and also ACE, who's done a lot of great work on this issue as well. We were able to help pass some of the best legislation in the country to keep people in their homes when they're foreclosed on, to be able to hold banks accountable, and we have two that we're suing right now, US Bank and Deutsche Bank, because of the work that we did together to get that in place. But we know what happens when you have one liquor store, one bad motel, one bad empty lot, or a vacant property on your block. The windows get broken, the graffiti and the tagging goes up, and soon the entire block is threatened by the crime that comes in there. We've seen in South LA folks in vacant properties that are running prostitution and sex trafficking rings inside these vacant homes. We have to make sure, as I've done in my own district, we had a motel in East Hollywood that for years was a piece of that blight. We went after them and built the case. Ms. Perry deserves credit because she passed a law that actually makes that more accelerated now. And as mayor, I will make sure that we're working with our community groups, as we did with ACE and others, to identify which particular homes had these foreclosure issues and rental issues. And any group, whether it's Community Coalition or Scope or others, who identify that, I'm going to be bringing out our city inspectors to make sure we do take swift action. And finally, I'll work with our next city attorney to bring back the neighborhood prosecutor program, which is critical for us to be able to have city attorneys in each police division who are working on that quality of life right there. And I'll yield back my time because I went so long last time.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. Ms. Gruhl?
Just recently, we had 20 years acknowledgement of the civil disturbance. And we were there at that piece of property, that vacant piece of property that had been there 20 years. I don't know how many of you were there. We had a special event that was there to commemorate and acknowledge and say we can do so much better. So in each of our communities, when we look at the abatement process and the importance of that, it's making sure that our housing department, our building and safety department, every single department that is responsible for doing that kind of abatement is doing their job. I'd like to ensure that we have a program that was here before called CityStat that looked exactly at how many complaints have you had and how have you done it. Because I don't know about you, but you can have a lot of good goals, but if you don't have accountability, it doesn't happen. And in our communities, that broken window concept happens all the time, no matter where you represent in the city of LA. And in my old neighborhood, we used to have bulky item, pickup day, find those locations, find those abandoned cars, get them taken away. Making sure that we do it from the community up, but that you have from the city of Los Angeles the actual enforcement and participation. And so I would like us to see, whether it be working with the organizations that are here, neighborhood councils, whether it be the city prosecutors, whatever it may be, to identify those blocks and literally go block by block to improve our neighborhoods. Because it's about graffiti, it's about vacant buildings, it's about making sure that the land that is there, that we have pocket parks and the ability to increase that in all of our communities, and most of all, that we do it together, because empowering all of us means we can change our neighborhoods together.
Thank you. Ms. Perry, same question.
Thank you very much. And I have to thank the Community Coalition and United Coalition East Prevention Program for working with me back in 2008 to introduce and then subsequently get the City Council to support the ordinance that I led to streamline the nuisance abatement process. The reason that I did that is based on my experience working with the coalition many, many years ago to close prostitution motels on Figueroa south of Vernon, the biggest of which was the Oakwood Motel, which is now the site of family affordable housing. Now, in the past, people were subjected to many nuisance and abuses like prostitution right there in front of their houses and where they lived in their apartments. Now, I wanted to streamline things so we didn't have to wait 10 years to revoke a conditional use permit and shut a building down. Now we have that. As mayor, I will dedicate more resources to that so that we have enough staff, we have enough inspectors to get out there and make sure that this ordinance realizes its full potential.
Fabulous. Fabulous. And we're back on time. You all are fast learners. I love it.
There you go.
Let me say, first of all, recognize that we have an overflow crowd, and we actually have folks who are downstairs, not able to be in this room, but they are hearing and seeing what's going on. And then also, you know, there are people over here on the side and all upstairs, so we want to recognize everyone who's here, as well as Unite. Representatives here from that organization.
Right here.
All right? Unite here, exactly. We're going to move on now to our next subject, which is housing. And from a community panelist, Angela McLean, member of Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. Once again, her question will be preceded with a preamble. Okay.
Now we got it. Praise the Lord. My name is Angela McLean. I'm a member of ACE, and I'm an in-home care provider worker. And in this economy, many people are just a couple of paychecks from foreclosure or eviction. Our homes have lost value, and many of us are struggling just to be able to pay the rent. South Los Angeles is hard hit by the economic crisis. Like thousands of others, I almost lost my home to foreclosure. So I'm especially aware of how the community is impacted by the housing crisis. I also live next to the Metro Crenshaw line, which is now under construction. So the questions I would like to ask is really about the opportunity that the next mayor will have to impact the development, and especially housing development in South Los Angeles. As mayor, on the topic of new houses and transit-oriented development, what will you do to ensure that developers use construction contractors that hire within walking distance of targeted projects, protect existing affordable housing and prevent displacement of local residents, while ensuring that developers produce a mix of new affordable and market rate housing? And lastly, incorporate community benefit contracts to provide on and off-site improvements such as local community centers, cultural enrichment programs, public art programs, and job training. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl?
Thank you very much. I'm a gal that thinks the glass is always half full. We have an opportunity when we're looking at South LA, and the opportunity in the transportation dollars is mentioned. I'm very supportive of project labor agreements to ensure that everyone has good family-paying jobs. I'm supportive of apprenticeship programs and ensuring that there's local hire in each of the projects that are in the city of Los Angeles. Because it's been too long where jobs are going to other people and not to the communities in which people live in and where they're happening. Whether it be for our transit projects that are going through the MTA down Crenshaw Boulevard, whether it be for the housing that we're going to do around the transit-oriented developments on the Expo line. We have to ensure, and the city can guarantee that, the city can make sure that in any contracts that that's part of what we talk about. And that we need to make sure as the next mayor, and I did appreciate, Marilena, that you said she and he. That has never really happened over the years when they talk about the next mayor of Los Angeles. That they be part of it as they serve on the MTA. To all of those contracts are going to go for people who live in those communities. I'm proud of my efforts, whether it was working for Tom Bradley or for working for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that the dollars that come from the government entities ensure that all of you share, that all boats will rise in that effort. And so when we look at not only the PLAs, local residents, employee benefit contractors, and the ability for us to make that happen, it's going to be all of you that will be at the table, not only to ensure we get those jobs, but to hold everyone accountable here and in front of our city council, in front of MTA, in front of the county and the state. And I look forward to working with all of you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Perry?
I was the individual who initiated the the Public Infrastructure Stabilization Ordinance. This is a PLA for project labor agreement for major public works projects here in the city of Los Angeles. This agreement goes for 5 years and applies to billions of dollars of projects and has been used as a model for other project labor agreements in the city of Los Angeles, like the Convention Center expansion, the stadium, the University of Southern California expansion, the Wilshire Grand, and a model for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority on the Exposition Line Construction Authority. This makes a provision for 30% of local hire for communities with a high unemployment rate, with a 10% set aside for people who are low-skilled. Now, over the last 11 years, I have brought online over 5,000 units of affordable housing for grandparents raising their children, housing for people who are formerly homeless and recovering from mental illness, housing for people who are working and they're just hanging on, but it brings a measure of stability into their lives. So for me, this is a no-brainer. I was the former chairwoman of the Exposition Line Construction Authority and was thrilled to be able to bring South Los Angeles along with the rest of the city. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The Crenshaw line will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with a stop at Lamert Park.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you. On the housing issue, I'm so happy to have worked with so many people in this room. We talked a little bit about what we did with ACE. Before we had the foreclosure crisis, we worked on establishing a hotline that literally in Los Angeles and nationwide has kept 100,000 people in their homes, because we got on and held the banks responsible and put people on the line to make sure folks didn't lose their homes in the midst of this and it didn't get worse. I wrote the legislation to make sure that tenants weren't illegally evicted. These are people who are paying their rent every single month in a home or an apartment that was foreclosed upon, something they don't own, and people were trying to illegally evict them. And they were the truly innocent victims of this. We stopped it here. It's been copied in over 100 cities. I'm very proud to have written that legislation. But now as we look at opportunities along transit lines, and I've been a strong supporter of the Crenshaw line, having a stop at Limerick Park, but also going where below grade where necessary so that we can keep businesses open and make sure that they don't get hurt in the midst of this, those businesses that have been there for a long time. It is now time for us to do what we did in Hollywood. Look at the W Hotel. Working with Lane, working with others, we said there, above our investment, all of our investment of a public transit line, we wanted a hotel and we wanted them to be union neutral so that we could organize Free Night here. Sure, we put luxury housing, but we also put middle-class housing. And then I negotiated for free, 25% of that housing had to be for low-income individuals. Why is that important? Because now a housekeeper might be able to go home to her child on the same block where she lives instead of getting on a bus for 2 hours or driving to the Inland Empire for an hour and a half, causing us all traffic and pollution and disconnecting her from her own family and her community. That's why we have to put these together. I have the record not just of talking about it, but delivering this. And as mayor, we will build on this citywide.
Thank you. Los Angeles is still home to thousands of vacant, we're going to get back to these foreclosed properties, many of them in blighted conditions. South LA has a disproportionate number of these properties, which create a nuisance and cost the city thousands of dollars for abatement and public safety. The city has had an ordinance on the books for over 2 years, which has created a registry of foreclosed properties, and yet no fines have been collected for blight. As mayor, what will you do to hold banks accountable for the money their vacant properties are costing the city and for the condition that is created of nuisance and health problems in the communities? Let's start with Ms. Perry.
Yeah. One of the things that has been a godsend to be able to restore housing and bring it back online has been the Neighborhood Stabilization Program under the Housing and Urban Development Department, and it's provided funds to bring housing that is foreclosed, housing that is abandoned back to life. I've been able to use that to bring back the full restoration of the Dunbar Hotel and to create affordable housing units for seniors, for people who are artists, for musicians to come back and live on Central Avenue and start over. Now, so thank you, Bon Bon. For those banks who are not in compliance with this ordinance, this is a lost opportunity for us to collect and to bring a new stream of revenue in there, to be able to restore this housing, to work with building and safety, and then to put it out to nonprofit housing developers who specialize in restoration, and to use that restoration as an opportunity to train young people from groups like the Coalition for Responsible Community Development or from Job Corps or for PV Jobs, to work with people to learn how to do trades and restoration work so that this blight on a community becomes a teaching opportunity for the community and leaves nobody behind.
Mr. Garcetti, hold your applause, please. Hold your applause.
Thank you. This is one of the most important laws that we have passed in recent years, and I share that frustration about its implementation. It's one of the reasons I was just talking to somebody from ACE that I'm running for mayor. You can legislate and make good laws, but if we don't have administrators who are going to be putting that in place, they need to go. And it's one of the reasons I've asked all our general managers in this city to reapply for their positions if I'm elected mayor. Because when you think about it, I don't remember President Obama saying, let me just take George W. Bush's cabinet, that will be good with me. In other words, a mayor who has the power to hire and fire his or her own cabinet of general managers under the city charter must have people who take our concerns seriously. I've been holding the feet to the fire of those departments involved. Many of the groups represented here are part of those work group meetings that we convene in my office and together with our union, with SEIU, because it is unacceptable that we see these homes without a dollar coming in. Now, we've used that law nevertheless with the city attorney to sue these banks so that we will see multi-million-dollar settlements probably coming from and accountability coming to this city from those banks that leave these properties blighted or who illegally evict their tenants in violation of the law that I mentioned before. It is time for them to be called to the carpet, to the table, and if the leadership won't do it, as mayor, we're bringing new leadership in.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl?
Thank you very much. And the foreclosure issue has not only impacted that homeowner who lost their home, but it has impacted the neighborhood at large. we have a neighborhood stabilization program as defined here that hasn't been doing its job. One of the things I've done as a city controller is to hold those department managers' feet to the fire. I've learned as city controller, you don't always make people happy when you audit them. I audited the housing authority and said, you're spending money on lavish meals rather than for housing for those that need it. You're spending money on things that are not going to be used for the community. So I'm in the midst of looking at that, an audit of the neighborhood stabilization program, and making sure that the dollars we get go to the people in the communities. Because as city controller and as the next mayor, I know who I'm going to hire and fire. I don't need them to reapply. I know who's doing their job and who's not doing their job. Because when you see it and you see that they have not been responsive to the community and to the neighborhoods, you need to take action. So when we look at some of the things, whether it be through the Conservation Corps discussed tonight, we can look at these homes and make sure that they're brought up to the standards we need to make sure that we train them through LA Conservation Corps, Home Build, all those other programs. But most importantly, these foreclosed homes have a face to them. They're a family. They're somebody who has been impacted by it. And so when we look at each of our homes in those neighborhoods, we have to ensure that we're providing the resources, the money is being spent correctly, and that we ensure that our communities are not in the line of fire for all of those things that will happen in those neighborhoods, and that we should support someone like Kamala Harris, who did an extraordinary job in fighting for us and going against those banks and making sure that we enforce the California Housing Homeowner Bill of Rights. I'm so sorry, Carolyn. I was getting going there. I apologize.
Let me ask a follow-up question.
Yes.
On this subject. There is an ordinance on the books, that's where the question started, that has not been carried out to cause the banks to step up to their responsibility. As mayor, how do you use your role in your bully pulpit such that you manage the conflict between being business friendly but neighborhood responsible, where you turn up the heat so that the environment does not allow these foreclosed properties to sit unmanaged? Right? Okay, I think it should be, is it your turn?
Well, no.
First, it's Eric's.
Okay, all right, okay.
I mean, Mr. Garcia.
Shut up, Eric, please.
Mr. Garcia.
Well, there's nothing business-friendly about letting a property become blighted. This is pretty simple to me. If a bank isn't behaving, we go after them. We prosecute, we go after them, and that encourages other banks to do the right thing. Now, as Gruhl mentioned that she already knows who she's going to hire and fire, the reason I'm going to make sure that this is for all of us, it's not just up to me, it's up to us who we hire. And I will make sure as we do that, that I do that in conjunction with community groups, not just in a closet someplace by myself. And the numbers do have to add up. And Ms. Gruhl, it was pointed out today in the Los Angeles Times that your numbers don't add up even to what you're saying you've identified in taxpayer fraud, waste, and abuse. So if you're going to come at us today, let's be honest about those numbers as well. This is about results. This is about solutions. This is about real lives. And so when I say I'm going to bring in a general manager who will do this, I mean it.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gruhl?
Well, a couple things. First, I'll answer the question, and then I'll answer this other question.
Turning up the heat, huh?
The first question is what we do with banks. Guess what? We deposit money as a city of Los Angeles in banks. If they are not taking care of their properties, they won't be getting our money. If they're going to do contracts with the housing department, they won't be getting their money. So a lot of talk doesn't mean anything unless you take action. I am proud as a city controller, and my numbers do add up. I have great civil servants that have come forward and said, here's the waste, fraud, and abuse, and the things that we can do to change Los Angeles. I'm proud that we have identified funds, and this becomes campaign silly season. Rick Tuttle is here, a great city controller, who knows that sometimes the messenger gets killed. But I'll tell you, I will continue to stand up and say, money is being wasted, people are not taking action, the city council hasn't taken action on many of the things, and the numbers do add up. It's unfortunate that after, I've been talking about this for a long time, that people are finally understanding that we have audits and they're reading them. I know how the numbers add up. I'm going to continue to be a tough city controller, even if they try to take on the messenger. I'm going to stand up for your taxpayer dollars so they're spent for the things that we know are important, good services for our communities and for our neighborhoods. I will always do that, no matter what.
Okay. Ms. Perry?
For those situations that arise when a house is on a block and it's bringing down the rest of the block because a bank hasn't done what it's supposed to do to maintain the property, for me, it's pretty straightforward. You cannot allow a block to go down into a downward spiral. You can't allow a community to go down. If the banks know the rules, the banks know the rules, this ordinance is on the books, they have to comply. It's really that simple, it's that direct, we have to enforce it. If it means that building and safety has to be more innovative and, have good management at the top to take the resources that they have and to work with that and to not carry on about what else we need, but we need to work with what we have and maybe realign, redefine, and reorder our priorities and always put community first and the quality of life of the people who live there.
Great. I want to make note that the foreclosure question and discussion we just had was from ACE. They had particular interests, Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, in that question. Okay. Before we take the next question, I want to acknowledge that Reginald Jones Sawyer, Assemblyman for South LA, is here with us.
Oh, there he is.
Where are you, Reginald? Thank you for joining us. Our next question is about jobs. We have a community panelist, Kathy Brown and Jason Hill from the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. Again, they will preamble their question. Don't be. Here you go.
Hi, my name is Kathy Brown, and I'm with the LA Black Workers Center.
Yeah.
A community based on organizing that's fighting to improve the access and retention and equality. I'm not talking about.
Come on. Slow down. Take your
You
breath.
can do it, Kathy.
Come on.
Come on.
Come here. Okay. The LA Black Workers Center is a community based on organizing that is fighting to improve access and retention and quality employment for the Black community in Los Angeles. I live in LA. I am a journeyman. I'm with the Laborers Union. I've been with the Laborers Union for 4 years. As I stand here tonight, over 55% of Black male and female workers are either unemployed or underemployed. I got into construction because it's something I like to do. And I did it to also help my family. It's a very good career. But as I'm working out there every day, I'm the only Black female worker, the only Black at the site. I see nobody look like me. And
Amen, choir.
I go to work every day. I do my 8 hours. I show up and I show out. I'm there before my supervisor, because you're not going to get rid of me. I'm going to be right there.
All right, Kathy. All right.
For your question.
To watch other Black people come to the job site and last one day, that hurts. So he will ask you guys a question.
He will ask the question. All right, Jason. I'm just going to go straight to the question, right?
Oh, yes.
All right.
So I got a
You got a preamble
yes.
too?
Yes, I do. Good evening, everybody. Good luck to the candidates. My name is Jason Hill. I'm with the Black Workers Center. I'm a native of California, LA, South LA. For 25 years, I've been working with the County of Los Angeles. So I know what it is to have a great career. I was able to buy a home and live a pretty decent life. Now as a mentor and a deacon in the neighborhood, As I look back and try to help my nieces and nephews, the good quality jobs are just not there. I want them to have a life like I had. So in the last 40 years, we have seen dramatic decline in quality work opportunities for this community and even greater disparity in workers' diversity in the few industries where quality opportunity exists, such as construction sector, where black workers represent less than 4% and women less than 1%. Coalitions such as the ones you see here tonight representing have forged strong partnerships with current administration to put policies in place that have created good quality living wage opportunities for all working families in Los Angeles, particularly those hardest hit by the recession. We have supported the city's investment in labor management, workforce partnership models such as Unite Here, diversity projects would connect black workers with unionized hotel industry, and tax investments in project labor agreements that will mean quality jobs and contractor accountability on hiring local workers, particularly those who are severely underrepresented. The question is, what are your plans to ensure the opportunities will be implemented with equal opportunity and equality that reflect the diversity makeup of the residents of South LA?
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy and Jason. Ms. Gruhl, I believe you.
Oh, my first, okay. Thank you both very much, and thank you for that question. Because as you said, there's nothing more important than being able to have our children have a better life. Making sure that our children have the opportunities to get a good job, that access is available for everyone. I did an audit this year of the minority and women-owned businesses and what kind of piece of the pie they were getting for the city of Los Angeles. The statistics weren't very good. As Faresi Hogan Rolls said, it's not a good faith effort, it's a good fake effort. Because a lot of contracts are given, and you're supposed to hire people, and they get that contract because they've added minority and women-owned businesses. And guess what? They never see a piece of that pie. So we looked and said, here are some of the changes that can happen in those contracts. But additionally, we need to make sure that in the kinds of projects that we have, whether again it's MTA, whether it is the projects that the city of Los Angeles is doing, that the communities in which they're happening are part of all boats rising and get that job. Those good family page jobs, those good wage jobs, not only those PLAs, but making sure that as a mayor, you hold people accountable. As a mayor, you ensure that it's not just the talk, and you have those benchmarks, and you literally see that it's right. So as mayor, I will continue, as I have as city controller, to look under the hood to make sure that it's actually happened. And this young lady who's a great construction worker, good for you. I drive a forklift, just so you know, and so someday, if I'm not in elective office, I'll be out there with you on the forklift. So.
Thank you. Ms. Perry?
Thank you to Kathy and her colleague, Jason, for sharing those very, very compelling words. You know, we're lucky we live where we do because the weather is good and people can work outside all year long. And we have some large projects on the horizon. But the difference now versus 10 years ago is we have community benefits agreements. Those have enabled us to be able to reach directly into people's communities and pull them along. Now, I've said these names of these organizations before, so I'm not going to go through it again. But what I will say is this. The commitment will be deepened with me as mayor. I will reach even farther than I already have to pull everyone along and to do it in a very personal way. If it's not through faith-based institutions, and again, the Job Corps, the PV Jobs, CRCD, and the places that many of you have worked with and already know because they've been your partners in this struggle. But to push even farther, it will never be enough. We must always go deeper. We must always make gender equality and racial equality a top priority and put everyone back to work. Somebody asked me the other day, how do you deal with the tensions between the races? I said, you put people to work. If everybody has a job, nobody's going to care what color somebody's skin is.
That's right.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Mr. Garcetti?
Amen. To the Black Workers Center, thank you for your work. Thank you for your personal courage. I know what it was like at Disney Concert Hall. There was one female iron worker that worked there. Tell you what that felt like, hearing the stories of what it was like. So thank you for your courage. And Jason, thank you for the question. I'm going to be quick because there's a lot I want to do. One, I want to take in the areas that are the most disadvantaged of this city a guarantee of a summer job for every youth that wants one. In Watts this summer, we had 92 young men and women show up for 92 jobs. 562 of them showed up for 92 jobs. That meant that almost 500 young people that wanted to work had to be told it doesn't exist. I'm going to change that as mayor. Two, I will hire ex-offenders in the mayor's office to lead by example, first and foremost, when I'm mayor. Three, I want to have local hiring agreements so that we don't just have on some contracts, but all contracts, and you get an additional point or two on your application if you're showing that you're going to hire locally so that you can outbid others and get those contracts for those contractors that have a conscience. Fourth, I will expect them to list their diversity goals, both in terms of ex-offenders and in terms of how many African Americans are going to be in there, Latinos, et cetera. Five, I will unify our vocational programs that are right now split between community college, between LAUSD, adult ed, and the city, and bring those together. Sixth, 10% of our apprentices now are African American, but there's only 4% on the work site. We've got to change the network that cuts off those that are trained from actually getting the jobs. And I will bring contractors in and say, what plans do you have just because somebody might not speak Spanish or somebody might not be Latino or white? How are they going to get on the work site? And that will go into my last point, a racial equity agenda, which I'm going to start not just as mayor, but right now, developing that with the Black Workers Center. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the kind of question that you don't want to answer. I'm going to ask a yes or no question with a 20-second answer window. First question. I think number one would be back to Ms. Perry. Will you commit to ensuring a diverse workforce and 40% local and/or targeted hire on every PLA during your term?
Yes.
Garcetti?
Yes.
Ms. Gruhl?
Absolutely yes.
You heard it here. Second question. Mr. Garcetti, you're first.
Yes.
Will you commit to creating a South LA Jobs Initiative and designating a senior staff person to work with the South LA organizations to enforce and expand existing job programs?
Yes, I will, and he or she will be responsible not only for a racial equity agenda, next offenders, but coming out.
It was yes or no. It's a yes or no question.
With a little leeway.
Yes or no question.
I was just following directions.
Ms. Gruhl?
Yes.
Ms. Gruhl?
Yes. And that's what I learned working for Tom Bradley. We had that kind of such situation.
Ms. Perry?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
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 Okay, so we all heard it here.
Yeah, you heard it.
You promised twice.
Okay.
Here's a question about tourism and hospitality. And before I ask the question, can we have any hotel workers who are here with us this evening? Let's appreciate them. Thank you for your work. The tourism and hospitality industry is one of LA's top economic engines, which drew a record-breaking 41.4 million visitors last year. It's responsible for $16.5 billion in direct local spending and is the source of $180 million that goes into LA's general fund through the transient occupancy tax. The hospitality industry is also the largest low-wage sector in the city of Los Angeles, with more than 40,000 hotel and motel workers living and working in LA. LA hospitality workers and their families are 54% more likely than the overall workforce to live in poverty. 40% of hotel workers are below twice the poverty level. Will you support a citywide increase in the minimum wage for hotels with 100 rooms or more? Where am I in my order?
I think you're at Eric.
Huh?
I think you're at Garcetti.
I don't know, Eric? I think it's Eric.
Mr. Garcetti?
Yes. And you know, when we had the living wage campaign for airport workers, everybody said the sky was going to fall. When we did that, I was the president of the city council, and I came out strongly for it, and the Daily News called on me to resign. Because I would stand up for somebody going maybe from $9 an hour to $11 or $12 an hour. And I told them, you try to live off of even $11 or $12 an hour, and I guarantee you not a single hotel will go out of business. And guess what? Along the Century Corridor, I don't see a single one that's closed down. We are negotiating with hotels now to make sure that we do this as a two-way street. There at LAX, we said we built an airport. You're here because of public investment and public dollars. We can do the same thing with our other hotels by saying, look, with TOT, we'll give you loans or other ways to improve your hotels. We want your hotels to have more people in them. We want you to make more money. But in exchange, we think that the people doing the work in those hotels should also be able to support their families and do well. So absolutely, if the city council passes this, I absolutely, and with a smile on my face, will sign it.
Ms. Gruhl?
Yes. The answer is yes. I thought this was a 20-second, but I guess it was not a 20-second. It was longer than that. Okay, yes.
No, this was a regular
and,
question.
You may recall, we actually went down to these hotels when they did not want to have this, and the workers were going to potentially be thrown out, and sat down and negotiated and said, this is important for this corridor. It is important that people have family wage jobs, to be able to have food on the street, to be able to afford to live in their communities. And so many people struggle every single day. And the industry that we have here, the tourism, is one of our biggest industries. But guess what? They're coming to see a lot of things that we have input on. Just recently, we saw for the Endeavor that came down that was part of our community here in South Los Angeles, in this area, and we saw more people come in tourism. There is a benefit to being part of the city of Los Angeles. So I stand with many of you, and as we negotiate with those hotel owners and others to say all boats can rise if we ensure there is a wage that everyone can live with, that there's health care, and so many other things that are critical. I was proud to stand when we did this on Century Boulevard and stand with you in the future. Thank you.
Ms. Perry. Ms. Perry.
I think I have a different approach to things because I get tired of the polarization here in the city. And I do want us to move forward. I want us to build our way out of this recession, but I want to be smart about it. What I have done in downtown with some of the hotels that wanted to keep their transit occupancy tax that they would generate, projected revenue, back on site and to spend it back into their projects, is I tied it to an agreement for job creation and to hire people locally, people who were at risk, people who were low-skilled, no-skilled, and to work with social service providers in the radius of the project. So not only did people get hired, they came job-ready, and they would be able to stay on the job and not be, they could perform well because they were ready to work. That requires the ability to plan, to look forward, to be strategic. These are the things that I bring to you and bring to the table as the next mayor so that we don't have to keep fighting with each other, having a hotel and making sure people are put to work and making sure that they have a living wage. These are not concepts that have to be mutually exclusive. They can be beneficial for both. You give the developer, the builder, the opportunity to build, and then you make sure that they are tied. Their obligation is to bring people along. I just want to bring up the Wilshire Grant. It was a unique situation because the hotel's being demolished right now, but they had a community benefits agreement. They gave the employees, okay, I have to stop, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to questions from our audience. And the first one continues on the jobs. This one is from Jessica Goodhart. Is Jessica here? She's in the back. Back there, Jessica. Los Angeles spends billions of dollars through the proprietary departments like LADWP, the port, and the airport. What will you do to ensure that investment leads to good jobs for South Los Angeles residents?
I think it's me.
Ms. Gruhl.
Yes. And I talked about earlier the whole part of having the Meeby-Weeby programs. And what we found in that audit was that I think
Would you explain Meeby-Weeby?
Yes, sorry. Minority and women-owned businesses.
Thank you.
I get into those acronyms. Minority and women-owned businesses. And the fact that they had allowed about 39% of them to say, you don't even need to have a good faith effort. There was no one watching. There were exceptions given. I will hold each of those departments accountable not only to the goals that they have said they were going to have, but work with nonprofit groups and community groups to ensure that you have a voice at the table, to ensure that the jobs that are being created are accessible to the people you represent and that all of us want to represent. So as mayor, I will make sure that in those departments, those airports, harbor, and DWP, where most of the infrastructure often is being built, that we have that kind of representation, that the contracts are not going to out-of-state contractors, but instead are going to Los Angeles contractors. We have good workers in this room. We had good workers in South LA, and ensure that they get those jobs. So I will, for each department, have goals and objectives and accountability, and if those general managers don't follow it, then they won't be the general managers of that department anymore, and you will have a seat at the table to ensure the jobs are for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Perry.
It's a great opportunity to, again, move our city forward and to work with community colleges to tailor their curriculum and to adjust it for the job opportunities that are presented by the port, by the airport, and the adult education at LAUSD. Again, for people who are going back to get their 8th grade education or their GED, to prepare them to be able to work in jobs, again, at our proprietary departments. But each department has to have a uniform or a universal goals and objectives and standards to meet, and they have to be a part of our legislative process so that they are on the books, done on the public record, and done with transparency so that the community can participate in a meaningful way to develop these policies and these initiatives. And as mayor, I would initiate that process.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti?
You know, all of us in this room are pretty lucky in that we own the largest port in America, the most important airport for flights that take off and land there, and the largest publicly owned municipal utility. I've worked with folks here, IBEW, with the Verde Coalition, with other people who have looked at making sure jobs come to our community as we change the way that these businesses that we own do business. First, at DWP, solar installation. We need to make sure that whether it's iron workers, laborers, it's electrical workers, carpenters, that we see both in the private and the public side. So DWP workers and non-DWP workers can do solar installation here, get us off of coal, which whether it's on an Indian reservation or not, still makes our earth a worse place to be and is the wrong way forward, and get solar power with jobs here. Green the environment and provide jobs to South LA. Number two, I will expect the airport, port, and DWP to have 40% as well local hiring for any of the contracts they have in the community. It's one thing to promise it for the city. We've got to make sure it covers those 3 proprietaries as well. Third, the Aviation Mechanics School that exists in Van Nuys Airport is a great program that almost got cut because of cuts to education in this state. For $120,000 in cuts, a program which hires people from our community to be aviation mechanics, and we need 30,000 of them, and you don't need a degree to get into this program, was going to get lost. Here's a perfect example. We own that airport in Van Nuys. It's part of the proprietary departments of LAWA, Los Angeles World Airports. I want to locate more job centers in the port, more job centers at our airports, and more job centers with our Department of Water and Power to make sure that we have people coming from our communities straight into those good middle-class jobs once again.
Thank you. Let's try to tie some of these subjects together. We know that the fiscal health or ill of the city directly impacts our housing, our jobs, our safety. We know that the city of Los Angeles has a projected $216 million annual budget shortfall, structural deficit. And we know that, getting back to those foreclosures in our neighborhoods, they are costly and could be a source of revenue rather than a drain. So this question is from Ace. We already know that Wall Street banks were responsible for the foreclosure crisis in Los Angeles, but we recently learned that their unethical behavior has also impacted our city budget. For example, Bank of New York Mellon, which is one of the largest holders of foreclosed homes in LA, is also squeezing taxpayers for millions through the interest rate swap. Furthermore, we know that the world's 16 largest banks illegally manipulated the LIBOR interest rate, which could have cost cities like LA hundreds of millions of dollars at the same time that we are already grappling with revenue shortfalls. The question is, as mayor, what will you do to stop banks from ripping off the city and to recover the money that has already been stolen? To recover the money, revenue stream. I think, Ms. Perry, it's yours.
Thank you very much. First, as mayor, I will work with our congressional representatives and our California representatives to change the law at the federal level and to make sure that it's working here at eye level and affecting us in the way and achieving the outcomes that we need to achieve. As mayor, I will work with our city attorney, whoever that is, to be aggressive and to be in great pursuit of bringing banks into compliance and creating that stream of revenue, for lack of a better word, that this is supposed to achieve, and to make sure that these laws perform in the manner in which they are intended.
First of all, where the question started was about our economy and closing our budget deficit. And first and foremost, we're going to always be here fighting about what we're going to cut or how we're going to tax people more if we don't grow our economy. And if you want a mayor who has a proven track record of growing an economy, go to my district, the third poorest district of 15, where for the last 2 years, Chamber of Commerce, which ranks us every single year, said we're #1 in job growth. We're #1 in new business receipts growth. We're in the midst of a recession. We're adding people to the payroll. That's important to have a mayor who has a proven track record of doing that. Number two, we led to foreclosures in the question. And one of the things is we have a foreclosure industry right now where people make money on every single foreclosure. We have to change that so that people make money by keeping people in their homes, not by foreclosing on their homes. And we can change that attitude from the top down. Third, LA Voice and others worked with us together to have a responsible banking ordinance in the city of Los Angeles. So now when we make our decisions about where to put our money, like Controller Gruhl was talking about, we have something on the books we got through City Council to rate the banks and to work with ACE and others to see who's doing this. And then lastly, lawsuits. There are a number of lawsuits similar to the LIBOR scandal where people manipulated interest rates or the amount of money they charge this city for bonds when we do big projects. And we have already initiated, with 2 different lawsuits, action against the banks. We're looking at that. I can't speak to it because it's confidential work, but know that some of us are fighting from the inside to make sure that in all 3 areas we hold these banks accountable, we get this money back, that helps us balance the budget, and that we end this cycle of foreclosure and poverty in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl?
Thank you. We have to, in Los Angeles, stop the cycle of layoffs, cuts, and every single day there's a new crisis. And more importantly, making sure that we're creating jobs in Los Angeles. And particularly looking at, as talked about, how we hold some of these banks and others accountable and showing them that the facts speak for themselves. I stood up recently and said, we're going to look into the LIBOR issue, look into that interest manipulation, and asked every single department to work with us and the city attorney to see if they were in fact manipulating some of the funds that we had and to go after them. I'm not afraid to stand up and say something's wrong. I'm not afraid, as I did when we had our cell phone audit recently and we said, how come you're not optimizing how much our money is and you owe us? You owe us money. And they said, well, you know, we don't have to show you our bills, because we wanted to see the bills. They were in each department, they didn't have them. So we said to some of these major communications companies, we'd like to see the bills. And they said, well, we have the contract with Recreation and Parks. I said, no, no, no. You have the contract with the city of Los Angeles. And they said, no, no, you have to get their permission. I said, well, who signs your check every month that you get from the city of Los Angeles? The controller. So what we had to do was subpoena those companies. And guess what? They're coming back with the information. I will continue to do that to make sure we hold those banks accountable. We hold everyone accountable to make sure that the money that we deserve and the money that you deserve, your taxpayer dollars, are spent in a way that provides the services for our communities.
Okay. A budget follow-up question. This one from Anita Thomas. Anita? Here? City budget. We're concerned about the elimination of the business tax, leaving a $400 million budget gap, cutting more services our communities depend on. Question, how will you fill this gap without putting the burden on struggling families? Mr. Garcetti, I believe you're first.
Well, you know, when we did business tax reform before, and Ms. Gruhl and I were the co-architects of that, and I've done 11 pieces of trying to attract companies here and reduce business tax for them, it wasn't about trying to give businesses a break. It's about 165,000 jobs that have left this city in the last 30 years while we've added 800,000 people. And so we have to ask ourselves why that happened. It's because we charge people, the business, you can be a small business, you can have $100,000 go through your business and lose $10,000, we still charge you for the $100,000. In other words, we tax you when you lose money. And when we did that, a lot of people said, well, you won't have any business in LA, and guess what? We had more businesses and more business profit. This past year, we did this for new car dealers. There used to be 150 new car dealers in Los Angeles. That meant mechanics jobs, that meant salesperson's jobs, but now there's only 50 left. Because the margin's so thin in new car sales, people went to another city, and they took the sales tax with them. That meant that they took $100 million of sales tax away to protect $5 million of this business tax. We've put forward a responsible plan that is a 10-year plan to get the business tax down as new businesses come back. And guess what? If more money doesn't come in, it freezes, so that we don't have to reduce city services. But we have proven that this city, I mean, if we all want jobs, right? We shouldn't have to have a lobbyist to open up a business. If you want to have a small business in this town, that's what it takes. If we don't get more business friendly, and if we don't look at that tax code and make it smart, we will continue to see jobs, little by little, go to the neighboring cities and other states. So I strongly believe this will help us have more people employed.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl?
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the only person who has a small business, where we've struggled over the years, where my grandfather and my father, my brother, my mother, and I all had to struggle and work. I can not only drive a forklift, I sweep the floors, I clean the bathrooms, and I drive a truck. We did everything we could just to survive. In 2006, when I introduced the motion and architected business tax reform, the real reason for that initially was we had a lot of businesses that were suddenly being charged money. They never knew they had to pay taxes. You know who those were? Gardeners and maids. Because I got a letter from the city attorney threatening them if they didn't pay, they were going to have a 40% penalty. They were shocked. So what we said is, we need to change this. That was what I said, it's about those small businesses. And I distinctly remember when we did the business tax, we said, okay, gross receipts of $100,000 less, you don't pay anymore. You don't have to pay anymore. And I remember when the city administrative officer, who's the budget person in the city, sat at the table and told me that I was going to bankrupt the city if I did it. I said, I don't believe that. I think we're going to have more businesses. And in fact, she came the next year and said, Wendy, you were right, and I was wrong. We had more businesses moving to the city of LA. But what we'd have to do is responsibly. And when you see other cities surrounding us who moved, Burbank, Glendale, Culver City, whatever, they're going to take our businesses and they're going to be gone. And they're going to take our jobs. So we have to be responsible. And we did that in 2006. And I'm going to do that when I am mayor to make sure that we have the jobs that we need, but we also are fiscally responsible, because it's a good question. We have a $460 million that we get each year for business tax. We can't say tomorrow that that will be gone. We have to do it responsibly and meaningful so that we create jobs at the same time, which we did with SEIU, was part of the whole plan that we did in 2006. Sorry.
Ms. Perry?
There's a lot of reasons why people find it so difficult to do business with the city of Los Angeles. Some of it is the speed in which we respond to people when they come to the counter to get their permits or to get their plans approved. That's number one. That has to change. Number two, a lot of businesses complain about the cost of utilities here in the city of Los Angeles. They're barely making it, and it's expensive to, buy water and power here in the city of Los Angeles. And number three, getting their employees to and from work. That's why it's so important to build a transportation system, especially for young people here in the city. They don't want to buy a car. They can't afford to pay the insurance. They don't want to pay for the gas. We build a public transportation system, light rail, back it up with express buses, back that up deeply into people's communities with dash buses so that maybe one day we can build a city where 100% of the time people don't need cars. That means they'll clear more money on their paycheck to pay their bills, to buy a house and have a better quality of life. And last of all, education at all levels. I mentioned adult education earlier on tonight. To me, adult education is another form of a wraparound service to take care of a family. Because when the adults have the opportunity to be upwardly mobile, then we get a good workforce, ready, trained, eager, enthusiastic. We have that now. We need to maximize their potential too. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just put a fine point on Anita's question, which was, how are we going to fill the gap without putting the burden, you'll have another bite at the apple, without putting the burden on struggling families. So Scope asked the question from that same question, but from a different vantage point. With the $216 million annual budget deficit, the current approach has been cuts to city jobs, affordable housing, public safety, and programs and services our families depend on. Other cities in California have implemented progressive tax options such as oil extraction tax, a higher documented transfer fee, and other ways to bring progressive revenue into the cities. The question, what specific plans do you have to generate new revenue and address the city's budget deficit that are not put on the backs of working families through regressive tax policies? I believe the first goes to Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, Carolyn, for this question. We have to, as I said earlier, stop the crisis of cuts and services and our programs and layoffs and furloughs and really focus in about how we're going to bring our city back, how we're going to make sure that we have the kind of funds that are necessary and not tax our way out of it to the people who are at the lowest level that are going to be paying those taxes. Think about it. We have parking lot operators that haven't paid their taxes in many years. If you remember, if you go into a parking lot, you pay 10% tax. Guess what? There were some companies that weren't paying at all. We have businesses that haven't been paying their business tax who do business with the city of Los Angeles. Guess what? We found, and I put forward, that if you have a contract with the city of Los Angeles and you're not paying your business tax, I take that money out of the check that I send you. We can do that today with the information that we have. I've identified in my audits a number of ways in which we could do things differently. Yes, today and in the future, where we can garner funds that I believe in the future will help us solve our budget problem. But we can't just do it alone. There is no magic bullet. If someone suggests there's one way to do it, you can't do that. What you have to do is look at job creation. You have to look at ways in which you can be more efficient and look at waste, fraud, and abuse. And you also have to look at those individuals who owe the city of Los Angeles money in the millions of dollars and make sure that everyone is paying their fair share and it's not on the backs of our residents of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Ms. Perry?
Let me finish the previous question about the elimination of the gross receipts tax. I wouldn't put our people at risk, and I wouldn't put the general fund at risk because it could take us all down. We're barely hanging on as it is. And to be able to move forward, we're going to have to build our way out of this recession. Now we have some opportunities on the horizon. I've mentioned a 5 million square foot project that will put people back to work, 12,000 new jobs just north of the University of Southern California. This is a unique situation because this is a private university, and yet they reached, after a lot of negotiating and fighting, community benefits agreement to hire locally. That's 12,000 net new jobs on top of the 90,000 jobs that I have been the steward of over the last 11 years in South Los Angeles and in downtown Los Angeles. This is how we bring net new revenue to our general fund and put people back on their feet.
Thank you. We have a question now from the Community Coalitions.
I didn't answer you. If you want
I'm
to,
sorry.
That's okay. We can go to the next one.
Oh, no.
All right.
We absolutely must hear from you.
Thank you. You know, we've heard tonight just how much people are hurting in the city. We've heard 55% or underemployment among black men in this city. We see what the wages have gone. I fear a city that there will be those who are well off that can weather any storm and be fine, and those who are too poor to leave, and nobody in between. That middle class will have packed up to another place where there's better jobs and less traffic, where there's more opportunities, and where the schools are better. And all that will be left here is a majority of folks who are poor, without benefits, without union jobs, with other ways to support their families, supporting the very wealthy here. We have to make, in difficult times, tough choices for those tough times, based on real numbers, and I've done that. And I've favored different ways in oil extraction. We came very close to passing. We should look at that again, an oil extraction fee. Document transfer is something we've looked at to help fund our Affordable Housing Trust Fund and get it back up to $100 million again. But I oppose, for instance, the sales tax that was on there because that hits the poor. It hits the poor at a time when poor are struggling just to make ends meet. And it's not the right kind of tax to put forward. And I also, as I said before, come to you with a record in the third poorest district, a district that's poorer than 2 of the 3 South LA districts, poorer per capita than the folks on the east side. In Hollywood, the average income when I started was $19,000 per person. We're #1 in job growth. You see, what that says is it doesn't matter how poor the community is in dollars. We are not poor in spirit. We can get jobs and people working, and we can put people back to work. That's what the next mayor needs to do. That's what I will do as your next mayor.
Thank you. Our final question for the evening comes from the Community Coalition's Facebook page. Under-resourced schools, gang injunctions, and the lack of programs for teens have left too many young people better prepared to be inmates than interns. If elected, what will you do in South Los Angeles to break the school-to-prison pipeline?
Yeah. Right.
I believe it is you, Ms. Perry.
Okay, you sure?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Over the last year, you saw me fight passionately to keep South Los Angeles tied to downtown Los Angeles through the redistricting process. And I tried desperately to communicate how important it was to keep South Los Angeles tied to its economic engine, because the revenue generated downtown enabled me to move it south of Washington Boulevard, to build the housing, to restore the Dunbar, to build the Constituent Services Center, to bring these opportunities that didn't exist there before. But the most damning part of all is now I know how poverty is created. The median income in South Los Angeles, when it was part of a United Ninth from South LA to downtown, was $50,000. After redistricting, it is now $16,000. That is how you create poverty, by orchestrating political backroom deals. That will stop, and it will never happen again with me as mayor.
Excellent.
I didn't say that.
Mr. Garcetti?
First and foremost, it starts in the classroom. Classroom to prison starts in the classroom. We've got to get our best teachers into our worst performing schools. We have to make sure that they are here for us to take care of our children, and to make sure that you are not judged by which zip code you come from, the outcome of your school. Second, a summer jobs guarantee for our young people. In those areas where we have gang reduction and youth development zones, I want to make sure every young person that wants to work can work in the summertime, to queue themselves up for careers instead of for prison. And in the summertime, when so many of our young people don't have a place to go, when I lost a 16-year-old girl in my district who was walking with her boyfriend, hand in hand, a block and a half from a closed park, and she had never been involved in a gang, never been arrested, and somebody rolled up and shot her in the back and killed her. That hit me so hard that we started a program that summer called At the Park After Dark, to bring athletic and arts and education activities in the summertime. And the cops said, please don't do this. There's going to be shootouts. It's going to cause violence. But I said, we have to do something different. And building on the success of Summer of Success and that, we've put forward now summer night lights, which went from 1 park to 8 parks to 16. Now it's in 32 parks, and it's saved lives every single time. So as mayor, I'm going to look at expanding that to more parks and looking at year-round programs for our young people to keep out of that too. Those are the things I'll do.
Ms. Gruhl?
Thank you. You know, in 1988, I started a program called LA's Best After School Program. LA's Best. We went to the school district and we said, we want to fund this program. All we need is the property. You know, just let us use the outside area. And you know what they said to us? No, thank you. These are our schools. Well, you know what? Those are our schools. Those are our community schools. Those are our community facilities. And I did not take no for an answer with Tom Bradley at that time. We are now at 188 schools in the city of Los Angeles. Every single school should have an after-school program so they have a safe place to go when their parents are working, and they have a safe place so they can get the kinds of tutoring and after-school programs that they deserve. Because right now, in South Los Angeles, in every March or April, guess what? The school district gives pink slips to 60% of the teachers in those schools, because they're the new teachers and the excited teachers that come there, 60%. What's important for our community? To make sure there's continuity and that teachers that believe in their neighborhoods and their communities. K through 12 preschool, guess what? When I talk to principals, and I'm a parent of a 4th grader, I'm at LAUSD, I get this. They tell me that they know the minute in kindergarten which kid has not had preschool or Head Start. They already are behind. We need a mayor who has a demonstrated commitment of starting something and making it happen. We need a mayor who's going to make sure that the programs in our parks continue and that we get the kind of federal dollars to do that. And a mayor that's going to ensure that we have fair after-school programs, and it doesn't matter where you live, as I said earlier, the zip code, it matters that you get the same education no matter where you are for the future of our city and our children.
I want to thank the candidates for answering these questions this evening. We still have a stack that we can't cover right now. We've come to the moment where each candidate gets a minute and a half for a closing statement. And again, they selected numbers. And so the first closing statement, the order is Mr. Garcetti, then Ms. Gruhl, and Ms. Perry gets the final word of the evening.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you for doing this tonight, and all of you for being here. We need a mayor who solves our problems, who returns a phone call, who answers our question, and who delivers some equity and justice to our city. A little earlier, Ms. Gruhl said that it was the silly season of the campaign, and I just wanted to say something briefly there. I didn't bring up that the numbers don't add up with Controller Gruhl. It was the Los Angeles Times. It was National Public Radio. It was LA Observed saying that these were maneuvers and unrealistic projections and election grandstanding. So let me just say that very clearly. But I'm not here running on anybody's weaknesses. I'm running on the strength of this community and my record. To bring a summer jobs program for our youth, to end homelessness in this city, to have a racial equity plan here in Los Angeles, and to fight for good wages, and to bring a conscience to this city. You don't have to just look at the things I'm saying I will do. Whether it's community benefits and a living wage, I fought that fight, and we got it. Whether it's foreclosure and tenant protection, I've been there, we got the laws, and 100,000 people are in homes today because of it. In job training, Scope came to me first to say, let's not spend our money just willy-nilly. Let's have a healthcare career ladders that changed how we train people and got that victory. Gang intervention programs, summer night lights. When I felt that pain of families who lost their loved ones, I didn't just say what I would do, I did it. Green spaces, I've tripled the number of parks. You have an empty lot in this town, when I'm mayor, we're going to make it green and bring a community garden or a farmer's market, no matter what your income level is or your zip code. Queremos una ciudad de justicia y oportunidad. I want a city of justice and opportunity for everybody. I'd be honored to earn your vote on March 5th and to be your next mayor on July 1st. Please vote Eric Garcetti for mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl?
What a great turnout of people tonight who are here to talk about issues: housing, transportation, education, making sure that everyone gets a family living wage. And I did say silly season because guess what? I'm going to continue to stand up. I've been talking about the $160 million I've identified in waste, fraud, and abuse today and in the future. That's my job as city controller. That's my job. And I will continue to do that. And it's silly season because tonight we want to talk about real issues. We want to talk about things that are happening in our neighborhoods. Because you want a mayor who understands that I'm going to be the mayor for all of Los Angeles. You want that for all of us. You want to make sure that it doesn't matter where you live. When you call 911, you get the same response. That it doesn't matter where you live, that you don't have to drive 10 miles to get to a clean or safe park. That's what you want in your next mayor, not someone who just wants to be the mayor but wants to do the job of mayor. Promises made or promises kept. I've told this story. My son became vice president of his school, and his slogan was, "Vote for Thomas, he keeps his promise." And I believe, and he said, you know, candidates, this was his speech, candidates will tell you things just to be more popular. But he's not going to do that, he said. I'm going to listen. I'm going to fight for you. If I've taught my son one thing, I've taught him promises made or promises kept. I've taught him to be truthful and honest, and I've taught him to fight for those that don't have the same things that we do. So I look forward and ask you for your vote to be the next mayor of Los Angeles, to fight with you, to stand with you, and to make LA the great city that we know it can be. Thank you.
Ms. Perry?
Thank you, everybody, for staying so late and listening and hearing what we have to say. I appreciate it very much. I want to be your next mayor on March 5th, 2013. I will bring a relentless focus to bringing everyone forward. I know that because that's what I've been doing for the last 11 years, and it hasn't always been easy. But I want you to know that I haven't done it alone. I've done it in collaboration. I've done it collectively with the community that I was elected to represent and to fight for. And I will do that as mayor for everyone throughout this city. Now, I don't see the office of mayor as a stepping stone for higher office or to leverage the position for personal political advancement. The office of mayor should be about pushing forward to make sure that people have healthy food to eat in their community so they can fight diabetes and heart disease and childhood obesity, a place where everyone can look forward to having their children grow up and go to school and come home alive at night and in one piece, a place where people have choices about where they can afford to live and a way to be able to get there. I work for people who need jobs. I work for people who need to get housing built. I work for people who need reliable public transportation. I work for people at all income levels and people who want to make sure that their children are educated and have a chance to compete. I hope you will consider what I've said tonight and consider electing me as your next mayor. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the Honorable Jan Perry, Honorable Eric Garcetti, Honorable Wendy Gruhl for your time this evening, and bring back to the podium Marquise Harris-Dawson.
Thank you, Bon Bon.
And Marquise Harris-Dawson just wants us to recognize and thank our moderator, Carolyn Webb de Macias. Good night, and we'll see you all in City Hall.